Today on Vault 29, Part 2 picks up at number 16 and climbs its way to number 29. You'll meet the volunteer who walked into Auschwitz and the fighter who bought a tank and drove it into World War II. Hang on tight. These are quiet decisions that saved lives and even rewrote wars. Number 16, Hugh Thompson Jr., USA, Vietnam War. My Lai, a South Vietnamese village where a US unit massacred civilians. March the 16th, 1968. Army helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson lands between US troops and civilians, orders his door gunner to cover the villagers and evacuate survivors. He reports the atrocity up the chain, knowing it could end his career. Aftermath, he testified about My Lai, endured hate mail and threats, and, decades later, received the Soldier's Medal, the US Army's highest award for heroism not involving direct combat. Why it matters. Sometimes courage means pointing the guns away. He proved honor isn't automatic, it's a decision. Number 17, Frank Foley, UK, World War II. Berlin, late 1930s. Officially a passport control officer, Frank Foley was also MI6, Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service. From a cramped consulate desk, he bent rules, tweaked paperwork, and even hid families in his apartment while he found them a way out. He walked into camps and police stations to argue for releases without diplomatic immunity in Nazi Berlin. After the war, he kept quiet. Much later, he was honored as righteous among the nations, a title for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Why it matters. A small office, a rubber stamp, and big nerve can outmaneuver a regime. Number 18, Keith Park, New Zealand, UK, World War II. Southeast England, 1940. Keith Park ran number 11 Group, the RAF, Royal Air Force Fighter Group, covering London and the southeast, the sector that took the hardest hits. Using the Dowding system, Britain's networked radar plus observers plus radio control that guided fighters onto raids, he kept it simple, small, timed interceptions, not giant, fuel-burning dogfights. Park shifted squadrons like a pit boss, met raids at the right height, and saved pilots for the next wave. Later on Malta, the island airbase sitting on Axis supply lines, he rewired defenses and turned daily raids into losing math for the Luftwaffe. Why it matters. He didn't win with speeches, he won with timing. Calm control room calls kept Britain in the fight and the Med lifeline open. 19. Aristides de Sousa Mendes, Portugal, World War II. Bordeaux, June 1940. With France collapsing and Lisbon tightening visa rules, Aristides de Sousa Mendes signed thousands in a few days, often for whole families, defying his government and losing his career and income. The visas let refugees cross into Spain and reach safer ports. Why it matters. He traded status for strangers and made neutrality mean humanity. 20. Lakhiman Gurung, Nepal, British Indian Army, World War II. Taungdao, Burma, Myanmar, May 1945. A Gurkha, Nepalese infantry famed for close-quarters grit, Lakhiman Gurung has 3 grenades land in his trench. He throws 2 back, the third explodes in his hand, shredding his right arm and wounding his face. He props his rifle one-handed on the trench's sandbagged edge, the low rim you fire over, and holds the position for hours, cutting down repeated assaults while daring the enemy to come closer. He later received the VC Victoria Cross, highest UK/Commonwealth Gallantry Award. Why it matters. When the position should have fallen, one wounded soldier turned a trench into a wall. 21. Jan Zwartendijk, Netherlands, World War II. Kaunas, Lithuania, 1940. By day, he's a Philips manager acting as Dutch consul. By night, he's hacking a bureaucracy. Jan Zwartendijk writes a single line in passports. No visa required for Curaçao. Curaçao is a Dutch Caribbean island. The note opened doors at consulates and borders. Paired with transit visas from Chiune Sugihara, Japan's consul, it created a legal bridge. Lithuania, Trans-Siberian Railway, Japan, safety. He stamped until his hand cramped, racing the border closures. Why it matters, he didn't forge a path, he wrote it. One sentence turned paper walls into an exit. 22. André de Jong, Belgium, World War II. Occupied Belgium, France, Spain, 1941 to 1944. André de Jong, just 20 years old, founded the Comet Line, a clandestine escape network for downed Allied airmen. She walked them by night between safe houses and over the Pyrenees into Spain, personally guiding dozens of crossings, sometimes in worn espadrilles with forged papers and a calm smile. Arrested in 1943 after a betrayal, she refused to name anyone under interrogation, survived concentration camps, and after the war quietly served as a nurse treating leprosy patients in Africa. Why it matters, not a spy movie, just a young woman wearing blisters into a rescue highway. 23. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, Czechoslovakia, World War II. Operation Anthropoid, the 1942 mission to kill Reinhard Heydrich, the Nazi protector of Bohemia and Moravia, the occupation chief. Dropped by the RAF, Royal Air Force, they waited weeks, learned tram schedules, and picked a tight bend in Prague, where Heydrich's open-top Mercedes had to slow. When Gabčík's Sten gun jammed, Kubiš hurled a modified anti-tank grenade. Shrapnel and seat-stuffing drove into Heydrich's body. He died of sepsis infection days later. The reprisals were brutal. Lidis and Ležáky, Czech villages, were destroyed and thousands arrested. The team's last stand came in the church of St. Cyril and Methodius. 7 paratroopers held off SS troops for hours. The crypt was flooded and tear-gassed before the survivors took their own lives rather than be captured. Why it matters, they cut the head off a regional terror machine and proved an occupied nation could strike at a terrible price that galvanized resistance. 24. Maria Oktyabskaya, USSR, World War II. Eastern Front, 1943 to 1944. After her husband was killed, Maria Oktyabskaya sold her belongings and wrote to Stalin asking to fund a tank through the Soviet Donate-a-Tank program. He said yes. She named the T-34, a rugged Soviet medium tank, fighting girlfriend, trained as a driver mechanic, and took it to the line. In fights around Smolensk and toward Vitebsk, she didn't just drive. She hopped out under fire to fix thrown tracks and keep the tank in the fight. Wounded near Vitebsk in early 1944, she died from her injuries later that year. Why it matters, she turned grief into steel and then drove it straight at fascism. 25. Eugene Lazowski, Poland, World War II. Nazi-occupied Poland, 1942 to 1944. With fellow doctor Stanisław Matulewicz, Eugene Lazowski used a harmless strain to trigger false positives on typhus tests, a deadly louse-borne disease feared by the Nazis, faking an epidemic. German authorities quarantined the area instead of deporting people, sparing thousands across a dozen villages. Why it matters, science became a shield, a quote-unquote plague that saved a population. 26. Wilhelm Hosenfeld, Germany, World War II. Warsaw, 1940 to 1944. Wehrmacht officer Wilhelm Hosenfeld quietly helped civilians, issuing work papers, finding jobs, and hiding pianist Władysław Szpilman in empty rooms with food and a coat. He kept a diary condemning Nazi crimes and used his post to shield teachers, priests, and strangers when he could. Captured by the Soviets in 1945, he died in a camp in 1952. Decades later, he was recognized as righteous among the nations, a title for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews. Why it matters, he complicates the easy story. In a uniform associated with horror, he chose mercy. 27. Gerard Roop, UK, World War II. Norwegian Sea, April 8, 1940. Captain Gerard Roop of HMS Glowworm, a British destroyer, stumbled into the Admiral Hipper, a much larger German heavy cruiser. Outgunned, he fought on, launched torpedoes, then rammed Hipper to save his men and damage the enemy. Glowworm sank. Hipper limped away scarred. Roop received a posthumous VC, Victoria Cross, the top UK/Commonwealth Gallantry Award. The German captain submitted testimony praising his courage. Why it matters. When the math says run, character sometimes says turn in. 28. Witold Pilecki, Poland, World War II. Auschwitz, 1940 to 1943. Witold Pilecki volunteered to be imprisoned, built a resistance cell inside the camp, ZOW, the Union of Military Organization, and smuggled reports to the Polish underground, early detailed intelligence on gas chambers and mass murder known as Witold's Report. In April 1943, while on a night bakery work detail outside the fence, he and 2 others cut a phone line, overpowered a guard, and escaped. He urged a raid on the camp. Allied leaders judged it unworkable. After the war, the communist regime executed him. His grave is still unknown. Why it matters. He walked into hell on purpose to get the truth out. That's beyond bravery. 29. Vasily Arkhipov, USSR Cold War. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. A US Navy task force boxed in submarine B-59 near Cuba and signaled it to surface with practice depth charges. Inside the sweltering low-power sub, the captain and political officer moved to fire a nuclear-armed torpedo, believing war might have already started. Launch required unanimous agreement of 3 senior officers. Vasily Arkhipov, the flotilla commander aboard, said no, argued to surface and await orders, and won. B-59 surfaced. The world exhaled. Why it matters. One no may have saved millions. The quietest victory of the 20th century. You just met 14 heroes most textbooks skipped. If one hit you, tell a friend and keep their story alive. Comment your number 1 and tell us what we should unlock next in the vault. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Vault 29.